It's time to go live. I'm Thomas J. Bellezza. That's Mr. Bellezza for the right mindset. Today, it is Saturday, what is it? The 19th, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we are going to go over something exciting today. As per the screen, we're going to be breaking down a narrative scene. That's right. We're going to talk about scene. We're going to read the scene. We're going to break down the scene one by one, a little here, a little there. We're going to get into it. All right. So, but before we do that, we got a couple things we got to go over. Got to wait a second or two for a couple people to show up. But more importantly, we need to let YouTube know the truth here. We will be reading a chapter from the R.R. Martin. Okay. So we will rewrite. Oh, this needs to rewrite. Where are we? Today's lesson. We're going to breaking down a narrative scene, but we are doing this for educational purposes. We're going to go over very specific things, such as we're going to be talking about the beginning, middle, and end of a chapter. We're going to be talking about how the chapter sets up context, how it creates a conflict or problem within the scene and or chapter. So this particular chapter we will be doing has two scenes. It has the opening scene, and then it has like a closing scene. So we're going to do scene, and the chapter all together. We're going to talk about these three things that should always be in every sentence, okay? We're going to talk about all these elements. So today is educational. I am not reading this chapter to be like, hey, So keep that in mind. Real quick, if anyone has any questions, you feel free to ask while we're going over things. Don't feel like you can't ask questions, because ultimately that's what this channel's for, is answering these questions. I'm just fixing something on the sheet. There's gonna be some. All right, so let's get into it. All right. What do we got? Oh, hello, flowers. Welcome. Considering my setup lasted almost a chapter's number of words. Ooh. Sometimes that happens, but again, just get it out. If the chapter's like 9,000 words, just let it get out, because the real work is going to happen once you're done writing the book and you go back and you might say to yourself, oh, wow, this chapter should be broken up into 2 chapters, etc., etc. Hello, Governor. Won't you come in for a spot of tea? Meet the missus. All right. Okay, so let's get into it. We are going to be doing the first chapter of Game of Thrones. I kind of sort of want to go over a few things before we get into. I wrote some stuff out. So for anyone who doesn't know, this is written by George R.R. Martin. But more importantly, it was published on August 1st, 1996. The reason I think that's important is for context. There's going to be a lot of stuff in this chapter that we might not see in contemporary writing or where writing has led us. For example, we might not have as much exposition dumps today. There's a lot of filter words that go on in this version. You're going to see he saw, looked, felt, heard, whatever, right? You're going to see things that aren't necessarily considered the go-to standard of today's publishing industry. The other thing is, this book is 298,000 words. The particular chapter we are going over today is 3,000 words. Okay, so, Now, another thing. This is the first book that R.R. Martin wrote coming back from a long career writing television. So that's an interesting little tidbit of knowledge, one might say. I didn't quite know that when I first got into it. I'm gonna. Wait. Before we jump into it, things we're gonna go over. We're gonna talk about the beginning, middle, and end. So this is something we're gonna examine in the chapter. All right. We are going to look at how every chapter or scene must set up enough context to challenge or reframe it in the conflict before resolving the narrative flow forward. So we're going to see and break down those elements within this chapter so you can compare it to your own chapters and things you should be looking for. All right, we're going to talk about these 3 things. This channel is always mentioning how every sentence must contain one or more of these 3 elements: plot forward, character development, or world building. This allows for forward momentum and little fluff. Remember, it's about trying to get rid of the fluff for that word count. Okay? Positions. We will talk about if a position comes up in the chapter, I'll be like, this is what a position looks like. It's identifying a character's stance or belief on something through behavior, most likely, and or verbiage. They are spewing it out and saying it. I will show you a pace. I always talk about a pace is the speed at which information is presented to the reader. So I'm going to show you what that looks like while we're breaking this down, okay? Additionally, I always talk about seeding, and people are like, what is seeding? I don't know what seeding is. Well, we're going to talk about how seeding is the gradual distribution of information, and I'm going to show you how R.R. Martin seeds, and he also foreshadows. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to show you what seeding looks like, literally, and then, of course, what foreshadowing looks like. And then you might be saying, Thomas, I love your logical narrative movement, and that's we're gonna see that in the chapter as well. And I also talk about movements. So a new movement is passages. I'm going to show you in the passages as we're reading through it. I'll be like, look, this passage focuses on X, Y, Z. And now because it switches its direction or interest, or as it says here, element, it switches it. So this should help you when it comes to, should I have another passage or prose, right? So when you're writing, like, how long should your passage be? A new movement, this rule helps you identify if you should break that passage up. Okay, so with that, do we have any questions before we get started? Any thoughts or ideas, concerns before we get into it? Are you looking for anything specific? If not, that's okay too. Also, remember, I have a poll at the end of the hour. We will go over the poll. So what is the biggest scene breakdown challenge basically you have? Pacing, character development, telling more than showing, and of course, fluff versus description. All right, let's get into it. All right. Boom, 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 boom. I have an unrelated question. Afghani, feel free to ask the question, and then we'll jump into it. I'll get the screen going so we can just sort of. And basically, what I'm going to do, well, Afghani's thinking of his question. I'm going to just read the passage. Now, I will show you, I did go through and I broke up where, because in this chapter, there's no soft chapter break or hard chapter break to identify that a scene has changed, which is good news because you don't have to always use a hard chapter break or a soft chapter break to break up your scenes within a chapter. Characters can move logically to new locations or into new situations. So this is a really nice chapter where that's possible. All right. What do you got here? What are your rates for editing a manuscript? That's a great question. Depending on your situation, I am very malleable. I like to work with people. It's not really about the money. So instead of giving like a specific number here, the best thing to do is just reach out to me. I see what your needs are and what you're looking for as far as like how much work it's going to take. And I basically make it work for you. You could ask anybody I've worked with in the past, especially if they openly announce it. I'm very giving. I'm very giving. So I would recommend just reaching out to me through the, as you know, the Make a Right Left here. Go to the contact page, just email me. Boom, we'll talk about it. But that's a great question, and I appreciate you asking that, Afghani. All right, let's get into it. This is going to be a pretty long video, but I'm excited for it. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. For the record, I also didn't do any pre-work. So this is all, you're going to see what it looks like with me doing it in real time. Ultimately, if I was developmental editing a chapter that's written out, this is sort of what it looks like. All right, let's get into it. All right. Excuse my reading, by the way, dyslexia. Excelente. All right. The morning had dawned clear and cold, with a crispness that hinted at the end of summer. They set forth at daybreak to see a man beheaded, 20 in all, and Bran rode among them, nervous with excitement. This was the first time he had been deemed old enough to go with his lord father and his brothers to see the king's justice done. It was the 9th year of summer and the 7th of Bran's life. So let's just jump right into it. This is what we might call an exposition dump, but it does have something happening. The big thing with agents and publishers, etc., etc., they go, you need to just throw us right in. Something needs to be happening. That doesn't always mean that it has to be action or people are shooting or guns. Yes, this is Game of Thrones. This is the first book from the series called Game of Thrones. Literally, the book itself is called Game of Thrones from the Ice and Fire, Song of Ice and Fire. So this is an example what something that's kind of pretty passive in comparison to, say, action, but something is happening. We are in the middle of something happening. They are literally on their way to something to happen. All right, so we talked about how we are going to talk. All right, so this is setting up context. We as the reader know right from one passage, by the way, everything we need to know, which is fine, I guess, all right, about what's going on. We know that this is Bran's POV, so we're firmly in Bran's POV. We understand that they are going to handle the king's justice, right? The king's justice, all right? We know that it's the morning. We know that it's the end of summer, so we understand the season. They set forth daybreak. All right, we already know that. We know that there's 20 people. So do you see how it's setting up the context? This is stuff we can then challenge and reframe as the chapter moves beyond this. So that's something to also keep in mind. Hello, Emma. That's something to keep in mind when you're writing. Every time you present something of context, information that allows for context, you can start challenging it directly after you introduce it. Some people might challenge situations without introducing context, and that's where the reader gets confused, and it causes a slow read, and, etc., etc. Hey, everybody, boo, boo. All right, moving to another element here. This is all beginning. Okay, so these three things: plot, forward, character, and world building. So the morning dawned with the clear cold, with a crispness that hinted at the end of summer. This is world building, all right? The reason it's world building is because at the end of summer, there is a clear and cold crispness, okay? So it automatically puts us into space, locations. What do we got here? Howdy, what's up, bro, and everyone else? Mr. Rowe. Mr. Rowe. It's going out Monday. All right. The XP board reveals who's in the chat. Hey, yeah, it does. Look at that. Has everyone booped? Please boop the like button. Speaking of booping the like button, remember, you gotta boop that beard, my friends. Boop the beard. Boop that like button. Get it going. All right, let's get into it. Hey, bro. Hey, Emma. All right. So, with that said, this is what we would consider world building. All right. Now, remember, every sentence should have one or more of these three things. It can either have plot, character, or world building, or a combination of those three things. All right. Bloop bloop boop the sword of bloop bloop. I have something in the works for the sword of bloop bloop. Keep yourself comfortable. It is coming. All right, so let's get into that's a great mug design. Someone really cool must have helped. Oh yeah, may have been the Emma of the Bennett of House Bennett. All right, so let's get into logical narrative movement just with this passage. I'm going to go a little quicker, but I just want to sort of get into the groove of things and then read through it, and then we're going to start kind of building on it, okay? So the pace of, all right, so let's logical narrative movement. What is represented in here? We have the summer. We have it's cold or crisp, okay? It's the dawn, right? It's morning. So where does it go? So the next sentence, the logical narrative movement is, they set forth at daybreak to see a man beheaded, 20 in all, and bring. All right, so it is expanding on daybreak. All right, so the morning, we use daybreak to connect the two sentences, and then now we get to expand on that. So during the daybreak, who is feeling this all? It is Bran, and the 20th that move. Okay, so, beheaded. Oh, a man being beheaded. This is more context, by the way. So this is plot. All right? So we're not necessarily getting world building per se here. We are getting plot. So the first sentence is world building. The second sentence is plot. All right? Okay, so this was the first time this is Bran. So this sentence is directly connecting to Bran and the logical narrative movement of what Bran is doing. He rode among them. Well, why is he riding among them? So we have to qualify that and add context. And this becomes that qualifier and context. This was the first time he had been deemed old enough to go with his Lord Father and his brothers to see the king's justice. Okay? So again, we are moving on. We are building on it. We have the Lord Father, the brothers, king's justice. This is plot forward and character development, because we are learning that he is deemed old enough to go on. All right? And by the way, old enough should be also an element that we could build on. Now, keep in mind, if you were writing this yourself, any one of those are elements you can build on, okay? Because the sentence presents something, you have to think, what element of that sentence do I want to build on? Or more importantly, as it says, when it comes to logical narrative movement, allow an element from a sentence to be explored, expanded, or qualified. Okay, so when you're writing your sentences, by the way, don't do this when you're writing your first draft, even your second draft. This is when you're getting into line work, line editing, when you're like adding a little bit more, when you're cleaning stuff up. This is not first drafts. This isn't even zero draft stuff. So do not stress over this. I implore you to allow yourself some freedom. But anyway, all right. So this sentence is he had been deemed old enough. So obviously, boom. What did they do? It was the 9th year of summer and the 7th. They are technically connecting to Bran's 7th year, and they're connecting to the theme, which is he had been deemed old enough. And it's because it was the 9th year of summer, but it was specifically Bran's 7th year. All right. Now this does character development. It does world building. Okay. I would almost say there's plot, but it's not necessarily moving us forward. It is identifying things. So it is mostly world building. It is definitely character development. What's this? Yes, I was going to save that chore for later. Yes, save that for much later. He's such sweet summer child. He's a sweet summer child. All right. By the way, I'm just going to show you a couple more things with this passage, and then I'm just going to sort of read through the chapter, all right? I just want to show you what I'm looking for when I'm working on my own work or if I'm developmental editing. This is what I'm looking for in the passages. That's why this, even though this is technically just a heavy-handed exposition moment, we're not really moving through physicality. This is ultimately just like, hey, you need to know this, right? But it does its job. It sets up context. It's in the middle of something happening. We are absolutely, at every given sentence, learning something about the world, the plot, or the characters, or in some cases, like the last one, a combination of two. All right? There is logical narrative movement. There is the three things, and the pace. All right. So pace, if you notice, the morning had dawned clear and cold. And then it's going to qualify that within the same sentence, okay? You can do that, by the way. Logical narrative movement can expand, explore, or qualify things within it, and use basically a comma to do that, or, or one of these, or one of those evil things. Anyway. Oh, look, AI. All right. Sorry. So the morning had dawned clear and cold. Let's qualify that. Let's explore that clear and cold with a Christmas that hinted at the end of summer. All right. So this does two pieces of pacing. All right. Two pieces of information are being presented to you. You're learning that it's the morning had dawned. the clear and cold, and you're learning that that clear and cold is actually at the end of summer, the crisp end. So we're learning fairly quickly right there. All right. They set forth. Now, what does it mean? Well, it means you have to look at each sentence at the information that's being presented. And then I'll tell you why that's important. So this is 1, 2, this is 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 pieces of information being presented. So technically, that might be considered a slow pace. You're saying, well, Thomas, there's a lot. But it's not lingering. It's not going deeper. It's not diving into those things, okay? The only time it's diving deeper is right here, 20 in all. Because, fun fact, this 20 in all is known as a positive phrase, which is a noun phrase that renames or clarifies another noun or pronoun right beside it. It provides additional information about the noun, acting like a mini definition or explanation. I knew I wanted to talk about that specific tool, so I wrote that definition down so I could remember it. But a positive phrase, that's something you would use, like, they stood against the wall, prickly. It's prickly with the spinally wood and broken age, whatever, right? That would be like the comma. That would be because it would be defining or adding to the descriptor of the particular noun. Now, the reason this isn't considered slow pace, even though there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? There's a lot of is because we're not going into it. Remember, the pace is the speed at which information is presented to the reader. But if it is just enough information for the context, that creates a fast pace. So even though this is exposition, we're flying through it. This was the first time he had been deemed old enough to go with his Lord Father and his brother to sea. Now, this particular line slows down the pace because we are doing what? We are exploring and going deeper into the previous information. This is where publishers or agents or even editors might say you got to vary your sentence lengths. And the reason is because sometimes you want some quick, short sentences to set up the context, and then that earns you the right to sort of give a little, because this is a really long sentence, a little longer sentence to sort of explore the thing you're setting up, and that allows a rhythm of flow because the reader is aware and informed and able to understand what's going on, and now we could sit in that information a little bit more. And of course, this is also technically pace. All right, is there one other thing I wanted to go over before I wanted to jump? No. All right, so let's just keep reading, and then we'll talk about the beginning and middle and end. So far, we are still in the beginning of the scene and chapter. So let me just put an aside. If you have a chapter and it has more than one scene in it, remember, the chapter itself has to have an overarching beginning, middle, and end. And so the scenes all have to sort of connect to that overarching purpose. And then each scene itself should have a beginning, a middle, and end. So this beginning should be setting up the scene, the first scene, and the chapter itself. So let's keep going. The man had been taken outside a small holdfast in the hills. Rob thought he was a wildling, his sword sworn to mace a rider. The king beyond the wall. It made Bran's skin prickle to think of it. He remembered the hearth's tales old Nan told them. The wildlings were cruel men, she said, slavers and slayers and thieves. They consorted with giants and ghouls, stole girl children in the dead of night, and drank blood from polished horns. And there women lay with the others in the long night to sire terrible half-human children. All right, for the record, this is exposition. We've talked about this when I did the prose thing, but ultimately we are diving deep into history and law, but we are developing a position. Remember, a position is let me get that up there for you. A position is a belief a character holds towards something. That belief can range from their favorite color to their thoughts about the creation of the world. In this case, we are establishing that Rob thought, literally, This is his feelings. It made his skin prickle because it had to do with the wildlings. Okay? Mace Rider. This is world building. Okay? The king beyond the wall. More world building. By the way, seeding wall. The wall. It's capitalized. That's seeding that a wall exists. This is seeding Mace Rider. Whatever. We're not really learning a lot about him right now, but it is seeding that he exists. That's what seeding looks like. It's slow information. But more importantly, Bran's skin prickled to think of it, right? Because Bran is the one that is thinking of Robb's position on this, okay? Now, I'm sorry. Yeah, so Robb thought he was so this is suggesting that Robb thought these words, and Bran is the one that's perceived because it's his POV. Now we are back into Bran's focus. So this is in his position. So Bran's position is that the wildlings are monsters. They're evil. They're slayers, enslavers. They drink blood. So Bran's position is that wildlings are evil. Now through his position, because it is his POV, we as the reader must assume that wildlings are bad. Not only because Robb, is like, hey, I think they're part of the wildlings, but because Bran's, the tales Old Nan told them. Well, of course, Bran has to trust Old Nan, and if Old Nan's been around forever. So it is technically, you can't really trust the narrative in that sense. But we are seeding and foreshadowing things. We are foreshadowing the arrival of the others, right? Because this is the others, right? That's capitalized. We are foreshadowing the wildlings. We're foreshadowing the challenge of that position. Because later on when Jon goes to the wall, we learn a lot from that. Okay, so keep it going. But the man they found bound hand and foot to the holdfast wall, awaiting the king's justice, was old and scrawny, not much taller than Robb. He had lost both ears and a finger to frostbite, and he dressed all in black, the same as a brother of the Night's Watch, except that his fur were ragged and greasy. All right, a couple things. We are seeding the brothers of the Night Watch, but we've also seeded it to the wall. Okay, so there's a couple things there. The King's Justice. So we are connecting that to Lord Father. Boop. And the King's Justice. Okay, King's Justice. All right, so these things are seeding the fact that Eddard Stark has status, that he is connected to the king, and that he has responsibilities. So these are ways to seed things without directly saying Lord Stark is, the warden, though they kind of do that. But I don't believe Jon Snow... Jon Snow, you know nothing. So I'm going to pretend I already knew this and forgot somehow. Each chapter should generally consist of one scene. No, each chapter can consist of one scene, but if it has more than one scene, as this chapter does, it has 2 scenes specifically, you could probably say it has 3, but really it's 2. But the chapter itself must contain a consistent arc over those scenes. Okay? I hope that helps. All right. By the way, this is plot. This is world building. Plot, world building. Oh, and character development. Much taller than Robb. All right, keep it going. The breath of man and horse mingled, steaming in the cold morning air as his Lord Father had the man cut down from the wall and dragged before them. Robb and Jon sat tall and still on their horses, with Bran between them on his pony, trying to seem older than 7, trying to pretend that he'd seen all this before. A faint wind blew through the holdfast gate over their heads. This should be flapped. Flapped the banner of the Starks of Winterfell, a grey direwolf racing across the icy field. White field. All right, a couple things. Bran is on his pony trying, because he's older than 7, he's trying to pretend that he's seen this all before, is technically a position. We are creating the position that Bran is like, hey, yeah, I've seen this all before, because he wants to look good in front of his family. Okay? So that's going to be challenged. Obviously, when he sees the beheading, he's going to be like, oh, that was a little too much for me. Okay? A couple other things. Stark of Winterfell. All right? The Grey Wolf. So that's foreshadowing what's to come. Okay? Because clearly we're going to see the dire wolves. But it is also technically considered seeding, because we are seeding the fact that dire wolves exist in this world. All right? And then... This is character development. All right, so there's a lot going on just in that passage. If you notice, he is writing more like storyteller narrative, which is apt for 1991. All right. But is it easier to make it one scene, generally speaking? It's not that it's easier to make it one scene. It's just, what is the purpose of that chapter? And does it need more than one scene? Sometimes the purpose needs more than one scene. Sometimes you want to set up a character dealing with a very political element. Maybe they're talking to somebody of note. And then maybe you want to explore what that character feels of that situation after the person leaves the meeting, and now they're like, that we have to watch out for that person. I don't think we could trust them. And then other people in the court might be saying the same thing. Some might be arguing, right? Because you have to challenge positions. All right. So that is technically 2 scenes, because the first scene has the point of the meeting and what is the character coming into that meeting to ask for. The second scene is more about their feelings on that. Could you make that 2 chapters? Yes. Yes, you can. Absolutely. But it's those 2 scenes do fit a specific arc within the same frame. So it would benefit pacing-wise to keep those 2 scenes together into a chapter. Hello, Emma, delayed response. All right, moving forward. Bran's father sat solemnly on his horse. Real quick, don't use LY words. You could use LY words. Have fun. All right. Just sparingly and purposefully. Purposefully. Long brown hair staring in the wind. Stirring in the wind. His Bran's father sat solemnly on his horse, long brown hair stirring in the wind. His closely trimmed beard was shot with white, making him look older than his 35 years. He had a grim cast to his gray eyes this day, and he seemed not at all the man who would sit before the fire in the evening and talk softly on the age of heroes and the children of the forest. He had taken off father's face, Bran thought, and donned the face of Lord Stark of Winterfell. The more I watch, listen to you, the more I discover how much more watching, listening needs to do. That's, I appreciate it, yeah. Well, yeah, you should be, I think maybe you're referencing, like, reading out loud, like, what, yeah, you do want to read stuff, you do want to watch stuff, you do want to, it's all important. But getting into this, here's a couple interesting things, all right? First of all, this is extremely slow pacing because... Oh, wait, I'm sorry. This is extremely slow pacing because it's stopping the story, and it's just sort of going into something. He had a grim cast to his gray eyes, descriptive. He seemed, remember, oh, you can't use the word seem. Don't use seem. Well, you could use seem purposefully. He seemed not at all the man who would sit before the fire in the evening. So this is sort of going into like more, we're pausing the narrative forward and we're defining, or we're sitting with. So that's why the pace becomes slow, because in this case, it almost has nothing to plot forward. Okay? But it does, in fact, character develop. So that's okay, right? That almost sounds like hitting 2 plot points. So is that what you mean by beginning, middle, and end? No. A beginning, I'll put it on the thing so you can read it. A beginning, middle, and end. Every chapter scene must set up enough context that's the beginning, to challenge or reframe it in the conflict, that's the middle, before resolving the narrative flow forward, which is the end or the resolution. So, back to your point, 2 plot points. If you're talking about plot points associated with the 27 plot point outline, then no, plot points are different than what we're talking about right now. We are specifically talking about chapter and scene architecture. Plot points are a grander scale of the narrative itself. There might be 3 or 4 chapters within a plot point. What I'm talking about is that you need to set up, and they are setting up a lot of stuff right now. They're setting up, we're still in setup. We haven't even reached the conflict technically. Yeah. So yeah, there has to be a clear beginning, a clear middle, and a clear end to every scene and to every chapter, to every act, to every section, to every, et cetera, et cetera. So beginning, middle, and end is different than a plot point. Okay. However, this is accomplishing plot point 1 in the 27 plot point outline because it is doing what? It is establishing the ordinary world. Stark is indeed the Lord of Winterfell. Stark also beheads people if they break their vows. There is a wall. There are Knights of the Watch. There are 20 people, so Stark is surrounded by a lot of people. There are 5 kids. Bran is a child. So we're setting up the ordinary world. Bran is just stepping into his age to be allowed to see the king's justice. So all this act is definitely setting up a lot of the ordinary world. But back to Stark is an honorable fool. He sure is. He should have never said anything. He should have just been like, hey. I apologize for not waiting until the end to ask. I have other questions, so I'll ask them. No, it's all right, bro. Because that question actually helps reframe what's going on for other people that might be listening, and showing that there are definitely 2 different elements to the way we approach stuff. All right. Okay. There were questions asked and answers given there in the chill of morning, but afterward Bran could not recall much of what had been said. Finally, his Lord Father gave a command, and 2... by the way, this officially starts... We'll just do this. Boop. This officially starts the conflict, or the middle, of the scene. Because we are moving into the responsibility. So the first part of the scene, which, by the way, took, just for context, it took 405 words to set up the context of the scene, and also technically the chapter, okay, where they are going to meet somebody, they are going to do an execution, and something's going on. Now we are within that conflict. So we understand Bran's position, that this is the first time he's experiencing this. We understand this is normal for Lord Stark. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff. All right, so let's do it. There were questions asked and answers given there in the chill of morning, but afterward Bran could not recall much of what had been said. Finally, his Lord Father gave a command, and 2 of his guardsmen dragged the ragged man to the ironwood stump in the center of the square. They forced his head down onto the hard black wood. Lord Eddard Stark dismounted, and his ward, Theon Greyjoy, brought forth the sword, Ice. That sword was called... Okay. It was as wide across as a dismounted... I'm sorry. It was as wide across as a man's hand, and taller even than Robb. The blade was Valyrian steel, spell-forged and dark as smoke. Nothing held an edge like Valyrian steel. All right. Nah, there's naught wrong with your reading. I mean, the more I watch, the more I see the holes in my understanding of storytelling. Well, that's really good that you're seeing those elements as we break things down. I do want to get into a couple things. So this is a very old style of writing. Contemporary writing shouldn't or normally wouldn't have this many asides or this much exposition. When you're writing, you don't always have to use the full names, but out of nowhere, it's like dismounted and his ward, Theon Greyjoy, brought the sword, ice. But I do want to point out something very important. It wasn't called Bloop Bloop, was it? It should be. The sword should be Bloop Bloop. Are you Northeast England or Scottish? I want to point out something very important here. Let me take off this so you can see it a little bit more. There were questions asked and answers given there in the chill of morning, but afterward, John could not recall much of it. Finally, as Lord Von... By the way, finally would be a word that, like... I think it was the bloop bloop one. Finally, a line editor today would be like, you should take that out. Just get, it's an ly word, and also finally is like, and then. But again, this is older writing, but also, this is what I'm getting at. This is voice, and I'm going to show you why. So finally, his Lord Father gave a command, and two of his dragged. I want to get to the part. This right here, ice, that sword was called. That aside and short sentence and the way it's put in there is voice. It's a way of presenting exposition. It's a way of using words. There's another thing. It was as wide across his hands and taller. Okay. So, more importantly, this phrasing is a sample of Martin's voice, and taller even than Rob. Okay, so I use something similar to that. I say not but a foot away, right? Not but a foot away. Like, that's an old way of saying it, but like Grammarly would be like, hey, there's a better way to say that, right? But you're allowed to do that in your narrative, especially if it is associated with the theme of time. So if usually it's like, I call it backwards talking, but it is like the Middle Ages or the that kind of talk. Obviously, it's not backwards talk. They talk normal for their time, but words were completely different. Like if we went back to the Middle Ages, we wouldn't understand anyone because they're not using what we know today as the language, right? So sometimes when you're writing more epic fantasy or Middle Age kind of era, like if it's Westernish, it's okay to sort of play with that. But this is what voice looks like. Okay. Also, don't use the word was. Was is bad. You can use the word was. Remember, purposefully. All right. The blade was Valyrian steel, and this is just exposition. Nothing held an edge like Valyrian steel. This is also author voice, and the reason is because he's sort of like adding little asides. That is part of Martin's voice, right? It does it. I mean, obviously that's world building. So the sentence does qualify to three things. And also this is all through Bran's POV. So we know that Bran knows this stuff. And Bran is the one that is gauging. It was, by the way, don't use the word was. It was as wide across as a man's hand and taller even than Rob. That's Bran making that descriptor. He's the one who's, it is wide, right? And taller. And the sword is taller than my brother Rob because that is what I can compare it to. And now Bran has to know this information for us to know it because it is the POV of Bran. It is not omniscient. It is limited. It's third person limited. So the blade was Valyrian steel, Spellforge. I don't think Bran might know Spellforge, but again, and dark as smoke, nothing held an edge like Valyrian steel. That sword was called. Yeah, that sword was called. Yeah. I mean, for a more straightforward, it'd be like, brought forth the sword ice, right? But now we're taking away sort of like the author's voice. All right, let's keep going. I'm sorry. We're doing pretty good here. His father peeled off his gloves and handed them to Jory Cassell, the captain of his... Oh, yeah, that guy dies. Spoiler. The captain of his household guard. He took hold of ice with both hands and said, in the name of Robert of House Baratheon, world building, the first of his name, king of the Andals, and the Ronyar, and the first men, world building, Lord of the 7 kingdoms and protector of the realm, by the word of Edark of the house of Stark, Lord of Winterfell and the water. Can you just cut his head off, sir? I do sentence you to die. He lifted the great sword high above his head. Ooh. All right, so obviously there's a lot of world building there. We are technically also building character in how Stark is. We learned everything we need to know in one long-ass proclamation. So we now know who the king is. We now know that he's the king of the Andals, so the people are called the Andals. There's also a separate group of people called the First Men, and we know that there's 7 kingdoms, and Robert and Stark are protectors of the realms, and or more specifically Robert, and then Edark of the house. By the way, I use that in my emails. I call people, like, I'll be like, hello of the house, whatever their last name is. Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the... Now we know everything. King of the Sandals. All right. Sorry. Bran's bastard brother, Jon Snow, moved closer. All right, we just learned that he's the bastard brother. Keep the pony well in hand, he whispered, and don't look away. Father will know if you do. Positions, character behavior, relationships, character development. Bran kept his pony well in hand and did not look away. His father took off the man's head with a single sure stroke. Sorry. Blood sprayed out across the snow as red as summer wine. That's a good visual. One of the horses reared and had to be restrained to keep from bolting. Bran could not take his eyes off the blood. Okay, so that's fine. This might, I think, a line editor. If Emma's still watching, I think she would agree with this. This would be like a line editor might say, "Hey, maybe rework that sentence a little bit," just because Bran could not take his eyes off. Right? Like, there's a different way to say that. But anyway, it is Martin, so we can't judge. All right, the snows around the stump drank it eagerly, reddening as he watched. A couple of things here. Great. This is a great visual, by the way. This is great. It's personification, right? So the snow has like a purpose now. Like we're giving life and choice to the snow. The snow around the stump drank it eagerly. So good. This is an ly word, but at the same time, that is a good line. All right, and then of course we are qualifying that within the same sentence, and then as. Don't use the word as. Again, you could use the word as much as you want, as long as you use it purposefully. Watched. Watched, I don't consider a filter word if you use it correctly. In this case, it is. This means basically that he's watching it. I personally would say that this is saying the same thing again. Bran could not take his eyes off the blood, right? And redditing as he watched. But the reason I feel it works here is because it is the after effect. So he couldn't take his eyes off, and then after the thing happened, then he's like, oh, wow, I can't stop watching the blood either. All right, continuing going. The head bounced off a thick root and rolled. It came up near Greyjoy's feet. Theon was a lean, dark youth of 19 who found everything amusing. He laughed, but put his foot on the head and kicked it off. If we didn't learn that Greyjoy was in this group context earlier with the ward, Theon Greyjoy, this moment wouldn't make sense. We'd be confused. We'd be like, who the hell is Greyjoy? Okay. Who the hell is Greyjoy, right? We'd be like, I don't know who he is, and we wouldn't know who Theon is. But because he mentioned Theon Greyjoy, we're allowed to use his last name and then his first name. Again, don't use the word was. You can use the word as long as it's purposeful. Sorry, who says not to use all these words? It's like TikTok, Instagram. If you watch YouTube enough, and you watch those videos where they're like 10 ways to make your first chapter better, or how to increase your prose. They always say don't do, but they don't understand this nuance. So don't, for example, don't use M dashes. Whoop, AI just took over my computer. You know. That's who says it. If you watch it, I make the joke because it's a small commentary on what I believe is not nuanced instruction or information. You know, it's like saying if you don't outline, you can't write, and that's not true. Though I also believe that even pantsers technically outline because they have an idea and then they're writing towards something and they're like, okay, this happened, you know. But anyway, what's the other thing that people say? If you don't read, you can't write. Stephen King is somebody who says that, and people echo that. They say, if you don't read, you can't be a writer. I disagree with that sentiment for many reasons. Maybe you watch a lot of television and film, and you're studying narrative that way. But he's saying if you don't read, you can't be a writer. And you can't consider yourself a writer. And I disagree with things like that. There's too much nuance involved in life. That's how I found your channel, because I started watching someone. Then you popped up. Oh, yeah. Were they doing what I'm saying? Where they're like, you know, you can't do these things. Or they're like 10 things that you should do to your toes. Every writing is structured outside of Thomas. Writer, Nazi laws. I don't know if it's everyone. There are a couple people out there that are good. I have my words on Brandon Sanderson when it comes to, because he does a lot of general teaching, not necessarily specific teaching, in those classes that we see. But there are things he says where it almost feels like he's saying you have to do this. Oh yeah, eliminate these words. Yep, yeah, and But why eliminate these words should be what the lesson is. It shouldn't be don't use was. Eliminate filter words. But why? And can I use them? Is there a place for them? And the answer is yes, there is a place for them. And the why is because it blows up your word count, right? So there are stronger ways. You know, for example, Theon, lean, dark youth of 19. Like, I just say it words. Leon, lean, dark youth. Okay? Actually, there we go. I just say the words. Leon, a lean, dark youth. Okay? But again, like dark youth of 19. You know, Theon, a lean, dark 19, you know, whatever. But there are ways, you know, it just comes down to a lot of factors. There are far too many factors to just be like, don't use. Yes, most I've seen, read, heard say all of those things. Yeah, there's just too much nuance to just say don't. Same here. Glad I watched the other channel, and now I don't. Appreciate that. I appreciate you supporting this channel, but I'm not knocking anyone who does say that per se. I'm just saying, as a writing teacher, as a developmental editor, as somebody who's been in the industry, can't, don't, won't, shouldn't, all those words are not used in the writers' rooms. Those words are not used on the professional levels. There's no such thing as can't. It's how. How do we use, right? So when you find yourself doing something wrong, it's really about like, well, how do I break that rule and use it properly? That's all I'm saying. All right, let's get to the end of the scene. I don't think I'm going to be able to do the whole chapter because we still. How many words is it? Yeah, the rest of the chapter is 2,000 words. So I'm gonna just finish this scene, and then I'm gonna explain how it's a beginning, a middle, and end. All right. All right. So Greyjoy, just for context, Greyjoy laughed, put his boot on the head, and kicked it away. Ass, John muttered, low enough so Greyjoy did not hear. He put a hand on Bran's shoulder. For the record, this is the POV of John. All right. This is another thing. I know this is another side. I get sidetracked, but it is helpful. It is definitely helpful to know both to know both views. I agree 100% with that. In fact, I believe that all knowledge is valuable. It just depends on the kind of research or the work you do to understand it a little deeper than because knowing and understanding are not the same thing, you know. Shouldn't the whole chapter be Bran's POV? That's what I was getting at. So Afghan, that is another thing people say. Maintain the close POV of a character in third person limited. No, you don't have to. You're allowed to move to someone else's POV. However, the majority of the chapter should be in the POV of a character, but that doesn't mean you have to maintain that POV the whole time, nor does the chapter have to end with the POV. So here's a great example. The reason this is the POV of John is because low enough so Greyjoy did not hear is motivation. We are understanding John's motivation. Bran wouldn't know that he did it, so Bran doesn't know the motivation. There's no way, right? Okay? Though we technically get back to Bran's, but he put a hand on Bran's shoulder and Bran looked over at his bastard brother. I think this actually should be... One second. No, it is. Wow, that's a weird. For the record, I think I'm going to stand on this. I feel like this is a head-hopping passage. Because Bran can't know the motivation of Jon. But then, this is still Jon's POV. Put a hand on Bran's shoulder. And Bran looked over at his bastard brother. No, I guess it's not. It's just, I guess it's weird. Because this is also still Jon. This is weird, though. He put a hand on Bran's shoulder. And Bran... Oh, by the way, this is one other thing. Should I use the person's name? So too many... Oh, yeah, there we go. Too many Brans. Now, just use the name. You can use... Clarification is the key to a strong book. As if the reader does not have to think about what's next, that doesn't mean to dumb it down. But if a reader can maintain continuity and consistency, they don't have to think, so it becomes a smooth read. Well, he is attached to this, right? Jon muttered low enough so Jared didn't hear. He is directly connected to Jon just because of the rules of the pronouns, so pronoun rules. He put a hand on Bran's shoulder, so if this read he, this he would actually connect to this he, which would connect to Jon according to the rules of pronouns. So Bran, this is two different moves also. He put a hand on Bran's shoulder and he looked over, right? It would be confusing. Is he connected to Jon or Bran? So it's stronger and quicker to just use Bran. Looked over at his brother. You did well, Jon told him solemnly. He used that word twice so far. Jon was 14 and hold hand at justice. All right, this is just... Again, this is an R.R. Martin thing. You see how it's like an aside? Like a thing ends and then it's just like, oh, by the way, Jon was 14. Don't use the word was. Okay. But you can with purpose. All right, so let's just get to it. It seemed colder on the long ride back to Winterfell, though the wind had died by then. Okay, all right, so this is officially... We're starting the resolution right here. So let's see how long the conflict was. Oh, wait. All right. I think this would be considered the intro. Yeah, 405 words for the intro. That's what I was saying before. All right, and then this is the conflict. Let's put this in red. this in a different color. Let's do this green because we're starting it. Green. All right. This is the conflict. So just show you, like, sometimes 377 words. So the setup, 405 words. The conflict of the scene, 377 words. And then look at this resolution. $220 words. So just as an aside, you know, like, when you're working on your scenes, don't worry about, like, how much do I have to explain for context. Sometimes it's not as much as you think it is, because you don't have to explain context for the whole narrative or the whole plot point or the whole section or the whole act. It's just a little at a time. Seed it out as much as possible. Anyway. Oh, it seemed colder. Don't use the word seemed. All right. It seemed colder on the long ride back to Winterfell, though the wind had died by then and the sun was higher in the sky. Bran rode with his brothers, well ahead of the main party, his pony struggling hard to keep up with their horses. The deserter died bravely, Robb said. He was big and broad and growing every day. More on Robb. With his mother's coloring, the fair skin, red-brown hair, and blue eyes of the Tullys of Riverfront. So world building and character development. He had courage, at the least. No, Jon Snow said quietly. Don't use LY words. It was not courage. This one was dead of fear. You could see it in his eyes. Stark. Jon's eyes. I like that he used Stark, by the way. Stark is because he's saying it to Robb. So that's interesting that he chose to use Robb's last name. Jon isn't technically a Stark. All right, Jon's eyes were a gray. Don't use the word were. Now, see, this is saying were gray, not were a gray. So that's also author's voice. The way Martin is choosing to use certain, like, words and play with word movement creates... I wouldn't say he's a lyrical writer per se, but it creates a rhythm. So Jon's eyes were gray, so dark they seemed almost black, has a different flow than Jon's eyes were a gray, so dark they seemed almost black, right? Obviously, it would be smoother without the A, but again, your writer's voice takes precedence over some choices. But there was little they did not see. He was of an age with Robb, but they did not look alike. Jon was slender, where Robb was muscular, dark, where Robb was fair, graceful, and quick, where his half-brother was strong and fast. Oh, so nice. All right, and then we'll finish up with this. Robb was not impressed. The others take his eyes, he swore. He died well. Race you to the bridge. Done, Jon said, kicking his horse forward. Robb cursed and followed, and then galloped off down the trail, Robb laughing and hooting, Jon silent and intent. The hooves of their horses kicked up. 1 second. Yeah, that's one long passage. Interesting. So done, Jon said, kicking his horse forward. Robb cursed and followed. Okay, so this is Robb's POV. And then gallop off down the trail, Robb laughing and hooting, Jon silent and intent. Robb couldn't know this. The hooves of their horses kicked up showers of snow as they went. That's a nice shot. All right. Back to can you switch POVs? You just have to have clear transitions. All right. So this is Jon talking. Jon and Robb are talking. So now we can kind of slip into their POV. But as soon as they leave, look what it does. You know, the next scene opens up with Bran again. Bran did not try to follow. Right? This starts the second scene, by the way. This is all the second scene. All 2,000 words. All right. All 2,000 words. Okay, so Jon put his hand. Yes. Yeah. Jon did put his hand, but this is Bran rode. This is Bran's POV right here. Bran rode with his brothers, right? And then this is Robb talking. Okay. And then Jon takes over. No, Jon Snow said quietly. And this is them talking. Rob's hair. Rob was not impressed. He says, "Let's go for a run, and I'll race you to the bridge." And John is like, "Okay." So that's why this passage stays in the POV of John, because John spoke. And by the way, when you're writing, you're allowed to do that. So you could have like a prose. You could write your prose with the dialogue too, so it would just be movement, stuff like that. Like, you don't have to, this doesn't have to be done, John said, kicking his horse forward. Rob cursed and followed, and then you could do that. And when it comes to when it comes to this rule, which is known as a new movement, when the primary movement changes focus from one element to another, a new movement is formed, changing the depth or purpose of attention. So in this case, because they are running, it is technically one movement, but you could get away with making this a new movement, because now this is John, and now we get to play with Rob. I would have made that a new movement personally, but as per the original text, it is one long movement. Done, John said, kicking his horse forward. Rob cursed and followed. The only reason I would change the movement is because we're in Rob's POV. This whole thing. Anyway. All right, let's talk about it. Boo, 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 doo, boo. All right. So, the beginning of this scene sets up the context. We understand that Bran, of all people, okay, is ultimately going to witness the king's justice. We learn that Bran is the youngest of the boys. We learn that it is the end of summer, but we also learn that Rob is the eldest. John is one of the brothers. We don't learn about Greyjoy in the setup, though. That's interesting, right? So there's no Greyjoy, but we do learn, before we get into the conflict, the middle, we learn that Eddard Stark, not by name, but Lord Stark of Winterfell, and we know that's Bran's father, had taken off father's face. Bran thought, "Don't use the word thought." Whoa, what the hell was that? That was stones. All right. Bran thought, "Don't use the word thought." All right. I was doing graphic artwork earlier with stones. All right. Bran thought and donned the face of Lord Stark. So we are ultimately, as they say, we have introduced the father, Bran, Rob, John, that they are indeed the Starks of Winterfell. But more importantly, the Grey Wolf is a part, the Dire Wolf is there. And then we've introduced the world itself. So this is the broader introduction to the world. We introduced the Night's Watch, the Wildlings, the others, Mace Raider, the King Beyond the Wall. All right. So we are doing the job of plot point 1 as well. We are introducing the ordinary world and adding context to stuff that'll come up later. King's Justice comes up more than once, I believe. But anyway. All right. So this ultimately sets up all that stuff. All right. But the conflict is Bran, okay, being challenged. Bran was trying to act like he's seen this all before, trying to pretend that he'd seen all this before. And now he gets to see the person die, get their head cut off. But we learn a couple more things. We learn that Lord Eddard Stark is the person we now are introduced to, Theon Greyjoy, which is interesting because Theon Greyjoy is an antagonistic force in this chapter. So it's interesting that he's introduced in the conflict of scene 1. And Thomas, why is he antagonistic force? Because he's the one that says we should kill the wolf pups. We should kill the wolf pups. So it's interesting. This is just something, like, as a developmental editor, I do this. Like, I use color coding. I'm bolding stuff. I'm looking at stuff connecting, and I'm making sense of it. A lot of my notes for this would be irrational for the time of 1991. For an author today, there would be a lot of I would have notes. I would have notes. But the thing is, it's concise, minus the exposition. But even the exposition is moving it forward. It doesn't take a lot to get to the conflict. It doesn't take a lot to move through the conflict, and it doesn't take a lot to resolve it. So, but the conflict itself is introducing the fact that he is the Lord. It explains this whole thing. So now, within the conflict itself, we are learning all of this about the ordinary world of plot point 1. So that's really exciting. But we are also setting up that Bran's best keep the pony well. We're understanding the position of Jon Snow through this. Jon Snow is, a leader to be born. He has moral standings, and don't look away. Father will know, right? So he's a good brother. He's protecting his brother. He's trying to teach his brother what it means to be responsible, etc., etc. So a lot of these things are coming through in the conflict because we are challenging Bran's position that was established in the setup, that he's trying to act adult, that he's trying to act like this is normal. Okay? What else? Here's a little action because, the horse. Anyway. All right. We're also continuing to, this is interesting, we're continuing to build on Greyjoy's antagonistic, as the antagonistic force here, because he's the one who puts his foot on the head, lean, dark youth of 19 who found everything amusing. He laughs, right? That's characteristic of it. He's called an ass directly. So that's interesting. We're already establishing and framing him as an antagonistic force within the family, which if anyone's ever read the books and or saw the show, you would understand why. Okay? But this is also seeding something. Theon Greyjoy is an outsider, even more so than Jon Snow, because he is somebody that was taken into the family as basically a captive, right? So we're seeding that. We're seeding the disconnect between how the Stark boys, including Jon, by the way, right? Because he's the adopted son, including Jon, have morals, have standings, have respect for the process. We're learning a lot about who they are through their behavior, and that's creating their positions. Greyjoy, on the other hand, he puts his foot on the head. He's laughing. He's doing all these things. He is not holding up to the standards of the Stark boys. All right, and then moving on to the resolution. After the beheading, okay, we basically get a little conversation between Robb and Jon, and they're qualifying what just happened. Like, was this right? Was this wrong? The deserter died bravely. Robb said that's creating a position. Hey, he took his execution bravely. That's important, which is important to Robb. This is a position. All right. He had courage at the least. So courage is a position. Robb holds courage highly. He believes courage is a good trait for somebody, even in death, even in your sentencing. Jon, on the other hand, is actually challenging Robb's position by saying, no, it was not courage. This one was dead of fear. This resolution is moving us away from the beheading and actually moving us into something a little bit more interesting as far as the narrative motion forward goes. You could see it in his eyes. Stark says Jon was let's get to right. This is seeding that there's something more going on with this character who came from the wall, who was found as a deserter. So it's seeding and obviously if you've seen the show or read the books, it is seeding what's to come. Okay? We're also adding more to this thing, right? He died well, right? He died well. Raise you to the bridge. It's funny that that's like just a snap, but the others take his eyes. Right? So we're building more on the others, giving position. They hate the others. Anyway. And then this is a clear transition piece. They are running from the beheading on their horses to somewhere else, which will lead to them finding the wolfies. All right. More so, let's see. Yeah, that's it. All right. Any questions? Any questions on what we just discussed? How I'm breaking it down? What I'm looking for? Did anything make sense? Was anything confusing? Please let me know in the comments. Feel free. Ro, you said you have other questions. Feel free to ask those questions. If anyone else in the room has any questions, feel free to ask questions, even if it's not directly related to this, if it's just something to do with writing in general. Of course, we always want to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, because you want to bloop the beard. Bloop that like button, people. Bloop that like button, please. For the love of it all. All right. Do you color your sentence backgrounds in, or do you not need to? Oh, I'm sorry. I got to put this on the page. It's a good question. Do you color your sentence backgrounds in, or do you not need to, so you can see things over the whole chapter? I mean, when I am doing this for myself or clients, I absolutely use the color codes. I use the color coding, and I use I do the bolding. So to make sure sentences are leading directly into each other, I will do this. I'll go like daybreak. All right, that connects to dawn, right? I will be honest, when I'm working on my own stuff, since I'm a little bit more familiar with what I'm writing, I don't necessarily have to do that as much because I can connect the dots. When I'm reading, I'm like, oh, that directly connects to that. But I am looking for that very much so in my own work. When I am doing someone else's work, I have to do it that way because I've never read it before. So as on a first time read, I'm just naturally going, like if I read this first sentence, it would look like this. I would go like this. I'd be like, the morning. Oh, that's an element. Had dawn, clear and cold. It's cold with a crispness. Oh, crispness is connecting the cold. Okay. That hinted at the end of summer. Okay. End of summer. All right. So this is one big thing. All right. Great. Then I'd go, they set forth at daybreak. Okay. Daybreak connects to dawn. Good. To see a man. Oh, a man. Oh, beheading. That's a separate thing. 20 in all. Okay. That's another one. Bran, oh, we're entering Bran. Road, okay. Nervous with excitement. That's telling, by the way. So then I would go, this was the first time he had been deemed old enough. And I would go, technically, this whole thing is connected to his nervousness, right? And Bran. It's connected to Bran and his nervousness. Anyway, I would do that. Oh, wait, you didn't see what I was doing. Oh, I feel so stupid. I was going. The morning, I'm just going to do the first sentence. Had dawn, clear and cold. Okay, cold. Christmas goes to cold, hinted at the end of summer. This would be one. And then I go, they set forth at daybreak. Daybreak sets the dawn. Man, beheading, 20, Bran, nervous and excitement. That's how I read. That's how I read when I'm working through somebody's work. I do it like that, and it really does help me. When I'm specifically looking for logical narrative movement, that's what I do. Then I'll go back, just as a quick aside. I'll go back and I'll look at this, and I'll be like, what is this? The morning had dawn, clear and cold, with a Christmas that hinted at the end of summer. All right, this is definitely world building. All right, it so happens to also set the atmosphere. But I go, all right, that's world building. Great. And then I would read the second sentence, and I'd look, does this have world building, plot? And if I get to a sentence that doesn't, then I know the sentence needs work. Then the third thing I look for is POV. Is what I just read, is the passage I just read in a POV? If not, then we... So all those things I just worked through, if none of that is there, I give a note. Previously, when I had sent you a plot outline, you had suggested that the scene I had were signs and the tall man were in jail, that it should be one chapter. But I think that was actually more about plot points. Maybe if I was talking to you about making it one chapter or breaking up a chapter, it probably had to do with pacing and that it was connected. If I was talking about plot points, it meant that you may have written something within a different plot point, but that thing that happened didn't follow the rule of that plot point, but it did follow the rule of the previous plot point. So that would be, I'm only assuming because, So my mistake, confusion. However, I was thinking about all the times that you mentioned everything breaking down into 3-part structures. Everything. The rule of 3, which is different than these 3 things. The rule of 3 suggests that every narrative has a beginning, middle, and end. Every act has a beginning, middle, and end. Every section has a beginning, a middle, and end. What does that mean? Well, every narrative has a Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Though you can break those acts up into Act 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But it's ultimately, you have a beginning. You have to set up context. You have the conflict, or problem, and then you have to resolve it. When it comes to each act has 3 sections. The first section is beginning, middle, and end. So you have to set up the act with context. You got to challenge what's happening in that act, and then you got to resolve it to move on to the next act. And then each section has 3 plot points. So it's a beginning, middle, and end. Because I like that. You're viewing it in a different way almost. Yeah. When I'm doing the bolding, or if I'm doing the coloring, and if I'm doing all that, really because if I can't really it helps me as like a learning tool, but also like to pay attention to things. Even when I read, some people read, like they'll read a book, and I need to have like a thing down. Like I have to have whatever. I don't know where it is. I have a bunch of bookmarks, but they're really long, and I use the bookmark, and I use it to read each line clearly, just because I have dyslexia. Didn't want to disrupt you as you looked to be having so much fun. I'm always having fun. I didn't realize the screen wasn't. That's on me. Also, stupid keys are too small on phone. Yeah, that too. Yeah. I think it had 2 plot points in the same scene. Okay. All right. So if a chapter for the main... All right, so this is a very important rule. When you're working with the 27 plot point outline, the main narrative, okay? The main narrative, which is usually the main character arc as well, usually, but not always. For the main narrative, you want to at least dedicate a chapter to something. You never want to break up a chapter into two scenes, or even one scene within one chapter, and throw in 2 or 3 plot points in there. The reason is because you want the main narrative to breathe through each plot point. So at minimum, there are going to be 27 chapters in your book. At minimum, for the main narrative, there should be 27 chapters. Now, as far as expanding that, you can add more than 1 chapter to each plot point. So you could have a beginning, a middle, and end for a plot point. You could be like, I'm going to have 3 chapters to introduce the ordinary world. I'm going to have 4 chapters for the inciting incident. I'm going to have 1 chapter for the reaction to the inciting incident. You can do that. But at minimum, for the main narrative, you should have 1 chapter per plot point. But as you're working on it, you'll learn, maybe this chapter is actually 2 chapters. You can do that. When it comes to your secondary plots, your secondary characters, or your secondary arcs, those can actually fly through things. So in 1 chapter, you might have 2 scenes, and the first scene is maybe the first plot point for character B, and then the second scene is the second plot point, the inciting incident, for character B. I wouldn't put more than 1 plot point within a scene, but with secondary characters, you have a little bit more leeway when it comes to that. The reason is, if you let the narrative breathe enough, it'll be a full, complete experience for the reader. When it comes to secondary characters, sometimes it's like them finding somebody, or meeting somebody, or coming to a conclusion to something, or they find the sword of bloop bloop, and that just moves their plot points along. But for the main narrative, you don't want to sort of be like, here's 300 words for the first scene, and that's my first plot point. Because you're not necessarily doing the job of plot point 1, which is setting up the ordinary world before the disruption. Maybe you can. I don't know. I personally don't think you can, because by the end of plot point 1, we should at least know the motivation of your main character, and you can't do that in 300 words. Because it's main character motivation, it's what is their life in 300 words? What is their, you know, like, unless it's just exposition dumping, then you could be like, you know, Jon Snow is a bastard child of Eddard Stark, and he wants to do what he can to prove his worth to the family name that has raised him, even though he is a Snow, which is not truly related. But his goals are to one day guard the wall, just as Starks in the past have done. Like, you know. But nothing is happening there, by the way. By the way, I love writing in past tense, but I make it a discipline exercise to write present tense to challenge myself, since I don't have to try to write past tense. That way I can learn to write both. That's a great thing to do, Ro. I recommend that to everybody. In fact, if you mostly write in third person limited, try writing in first person. Or omniscient. I would even say try writing in second person just to feel the fun of it. The reason is, even past and present, and future tense, by the way, there is a future tense you could write in. These things just help you look at stories differently. In fact, if you are traditionally writing in third-person limited past tense, like I do, for a lot of my stuff, except for the sci-fi, catch me tomorrow. If I write that, I did this with, I had a chapter called A Different Perspective, right? And it changes the narrative to be a chapter about the antagonistic force. So the chapter is through the eyes of the soldiers and not necessarily the protagonists, and they're being basically picked off one at a time, right? But I originally tried writing that in first person just so it was completely different than the third person limited experience. And by doing that as an exercise, it really made me look at the chapter differently, realizing it had to be in third person limited for clarity and consistency. But when you write in first person, there are things that you can add to that narrative that third person limited can't know. But more importantly, you don't go too deep into a character when you're in third person limited. So it's nice to sort of like take a chapter or a scene and rewrite it in a different perspective, or a POV, or, you know, third person, first person, second person, past tense, present tense, future tense. Just to sort of like reanalyze it, because it makes you see things differently. You know, it's a good exercise too. I feel like someone else is writing if I try present. I agree with you on that. Present tense is uncomfortable for me. I'm just, I like the ED sound. It just feels normal. He is running, or he sprint. Yeah, like he sprints across the room. He sprints across the room. Yeah, he sprints across the room. You know, I'm like, no, he sprinted. Oh, that feels so much better. He sprints, but that doesn't mean present tense is bad. I'm just saying. All right. Oh, by the way, if anyone hasn't done so already, we have the poll. We have a poll. What is the poll today? Let's see. What is the biggest? I gotta write the thing. Scene breakdown challenge. Okay, what is your biggest scene breakdown challenge? All right. What is your biggest scene breakdown challenge? Let's talk about it. We got 7 votes. We have pacing the narrative. Ooh. All right, we have character development. Yeah. We have telling more than showing. And, of course, fluff. Verse. Descriptions. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right. So, let's see. We have 57% on pacing the narrative. Ooh. We have character development, telling more than showing. All right, we're going to end. It's definitely, we're definitely on pacing. Okay, so. Most of what I read growing up was in past tense. Oh yeah, well, you know, the 80s, 90s, 70s. It's all there. All right, let's talk about pacing the narrative. Oh, yes. All right. Pacing the narrative. First and foremost, rule number 1, no fluff. But Thomas, can't I use a little fluff? Well, it depends. Is it doing anything? Fluff is anything that doesn't build character, or doesn't move the plot forward, doesn't build character, and doesn't do any world building. So if it's description for description's sake, description for description's sake, all right, or exposition dumps. Exposition. All right. I choose fluff versus description. You chose fluff versus. Yeah. Well, this is the thing, though. It's all connected. All right. But more importantly, pacing the narrative comes down to: are you describing things because you want to describe stuff? You know, are you just like this? This wall is really made of stone, and it has black lining, and it's crumbling from its age, and it's been here. And then you go into exposition. It's been here for 1,300 years, and no one has kept. And it's the first time that anyone has ever seen the cat. Right? Like, none of that is doing anything. So when we talk about pacing, you always want things happening. Okay, but you don't want. Things are happening, but nothing is happening. But you do want things to happen through agency. Okay? So, if things are happening through agency of character, pacing moves quicker. If it's characters are describing things, noticing things, experiencing things, or emotionally... What's fluff? Fluff is description for description's sake or exposition dumps. I'll give you a real easy example. A physical one. This is description for description's sake. "20 years had passed since the last human found refuge within these walls that barely held back the cold breeze of endless fallout outside." Okay. All right. So, I know I didn't spell everything correctly. Refuge. Okay. So this doesn't do anything. I think I described stuff so much because it's not a movie and because of the writing Nazi laws. Well, description for description's sake, it isn't necessarily Nazi law. It's just, if you do that, then it is fluff, and therefore the pacing goes all off, right? So the rule is, if you're going to use description, allow it to go through the POV of a character, through their experiences and choices. Allow it to have purpose. Don't allow it to just be description for description's sake. So describing things because it is not a movie takes away the agency of why things are being described. And they should be being described because it's through the character's POV. But this is doing nothing. This is just description. The house smelled of old black mold, filling the room with a damp decay that had nowhere to go beyond poisoning any who dare venture in. 20 years had passed since the last human found refuge within these walls that barely held back the cold breeze of endless fallout. This also is exposition dumping. All right, so ultimately nothing happened. Yeah, things are happening. Like we're learning that the house smells and like it's been 20 years, but nothing is happening. nothing is happening. I remember writing fan fiction where fluff was a category. That's funny. Was it? That's funny. Made me feel like I needed all those details. The thing is, let's say I need all this. All I have to do is just put it through somebody, right? All right. His feet shook, unable to step over the threshold. Wait. Let me do this. I'll show you the difference. All right. Over the threshold of the house. Okay. His feet shook, unable to step over the threshold of the house. All the way. Let's see. Place his foot down. The smell of old black mold hitting hard, hitting him. His elbow rushed to his nose, covered the damp decay. The damp decay that had nowhere to go. All right. Oh, what do we got? Maybe. The XP rating system seemed to be rigged against me. Maybe, what is it? 150 max though, right? Yeah. Yeah, I wonder why they do that. Like, the more details, the better mindset. Again, you can have as much detail as you want as long as it's serving a purpose, but there is going to be a certain point where it goes from having purpose to having no purpose and just becoming fluff. The real rule, the secret rule, is vague but informative. I spell it right. Vague but informative. If you could be vague enough to allow questions to remain on the reader, but informative enough to have context, then that's the right amount of information. If you have to over-explain things to quote-unquote make sense of things, you're definitely adding too much information. And that's where the budget comes from, like the word budget, or like when you're writing a screenplay. Like, you shouldn't have to say... If you could say something in 10 words instead of 20, say it in 10. Right? Because that's stronger writing. It's more concise. It gets to the point. The more information a reader has to take in, the slower the read is for them, and the slower it is for them to keep up with stuff. But vague but informative keeps them moving. Or at least that's a rule. Yes, through the POV has certainly been taken notice of. Right? It's a nice little change, right? Is liking me more lately. That's right. Try walking vertically and horizontally more. That way you get into more random battle encounters. That's right. But anyway, so this is now I have the same information, but it's now through the POV of the character. His feet shook, unable to step, unable to take him over the threshold of the house. Ro let it all away as he placed his foot down. The smell of black mold hitting him as his elbow rushed to his nose, covering the damp decay that had nowhere to go. 20 years had passed since any human found refuge within these walls. Destruction. Give plain to that truth. Walls barely held back the cold breeze of endless fire. So now that description of this is just description for description's sake, right? This technically slows down the pace. This keeps the pace moving because it is through the POV of a character. We're seeing emotional choices. This is an emotional choice. His feet, or his, I should say, his foot shook, unable to take him over the threshold of the house. Conflict, tension, stakes. Roe led it all away as he placed. This is a choice. Roe led it all away as he placed his foot down. The smell of old black mold hitting him as his elbow rushed to his nose, covering the damp decay that had nowhere to go. Now we're experiencing the damp decay through the character. And now this is his processing. 20 years had passed since any human found refuge within these walls, and the destruction gave plain walls. Plain wall colors. Can I spell that right? I don't know. Maybe it's plain? Plain to that truth. Walls barely held back. Right? So now it's M. Hell yeah, I love my M dashes. It's AI. Walls barely held back the cold breeze of the endless. But that has a different vibe in pacing than if it was just I'm describing the house. And then what's the next thing? Am I going to just go, there is a nuclear war outside and people are running everywhere. Nothing is safe and nowhere to hide. Right? So now, exposition absolutely can become processing, because if it is through the POV of a character, it's now them connecting their experience of what's going on to them processing. Now, if I did this, it would no longer be processing. This would turn into exposition. But as long as it stays within the movement of the character's experience, right? But anyway, so now I'm just, there is a nuclear war outside, right? So let's say, Ro, you were saying you have to describe because it's a movie. So let's say I just described that, right? Nothing is safe and nowhere to hide. The buildings had crumbled into piles of dark gray and soot. Those piles reached mountains next to a person, right? Okay, and then let's say smoke flowed from cracks. Adding to the thin atmosphere. All right, so whatever. I could keep doing it. I could keep just describing and describing and describing, but this doesn't do anything. This is a hard read. This is it slows down the pace, right? Because we're pacing the narrative. So far, nothing has happened yet. And you know what? I could probably get pretty with this if I really wanted to, right? I could be like, the... soulless truth. Smell devote, right? Like, it doesn't matter how pretty I try to get with it. It doesn't matter how do I describe it. It doesn't matter how many adjectives I use. At the end of the day, nothing is happening here. Right? The Victorian house dressed in red shades and the Victorian house empty, dressed in red shades and dark green doors. A like a smile from its soul is truth. Smelled like a. All right, so we're qualifying things before it. You know, the Victorian house. Well, it's empty, and it's dressed in red shades and dark green doors. We're still connected to the Victorian house. All right, now we're going to qualify this like a smile from its soul is truth. So that's saying that the red shades and dark green door, okay, dark green front door, like a smile. This is still right. And now we're going to qualify the Victorian house some more. We're going to expand and explore. Smell the old black mold filling the room with a damp decay that had nowhere to go beyond poisoning. Anyway, okay, yeah, I could go deeper and deeper to this as much as I want, but it's not doing anything, and therefore the pace of the narrative becomes super slow because it's not moving anywhere. It's not evolving. I have yet to add plot, world building, or character into this passage. There is logical narrative movement, though. I think that just naturally kind of does. The only thing I would say, this sentence feels disconnected from this, so this would create a new movement. Okay. That's how books read when I was a nipper, apart from the nuclear bit. Oh. Well, yeah, I mean, again, in 1991, books read like this, you know, R.R. Martin, you know, even, look, and watched. He's missing the word end, you know, no, it's true. Tolkien. No one's writing like Tolkien anymore. Shakespeare. No one writes Shakespeare, etc., etc. So, you know, like a lot of this, the reason it evolves is because we learn that it's harder to read these dense, exposition-heavy, description-heavy books than it is to read something that moves. It's like watching a movie. And in the movie starts off, and let's call that movie Lord of the Rings. And instead of showing the battle underneath the narration, it's just a black screen, and Galadriel is just narrating. It's a black screen, and she's just narrating that whole thing. We wouldn't be able to get through that. We'd be like, what? This is 5 minutes. But you need the movement of characters. You need to be experiencing what they're experiencing. So as she's narrating the rings, the story of the rings, we're also getting dialogue from characters too, and we're getting them to, and so that's what creates the movement. That's what creates something. I get all detailed during action sequences. For instance, when Signs gets attacked by the mechanical man on the train, it's almost like time slows down. That's fine. If you're describing stuff in an action sequence, that's fine. But like, if you stop the action sequence and you're like, the wall burst open, and then you start going deeper into like the splintering of the wood, it shifted and shattered and floated in the sky, flailing back behind the train as it goes 600 miles per hour. Those pieces of wood flickered and bounced off the side of the train, eventually hitting the ground and merging with the grass around the tracks. Like, that, following the wood all the way to the grass, would be description for description's sake. It might be interesting. It might even be a visual that, like, if we were watching a movie, the wood itself becomes the character that we follow through the lens of the camera, because the POV is on the wood. But at the same time, you know, that's describing action sequences is one thing. You know, in a fight, you know, you could be, you know, Dave held his hilt tight, pushing the blade against Jake's sword, both holding at a standstill. Like, you could write it like that, right? Or you could go, you know, the clash of steel rang out over the battlefield. Dave fought to a standstill against Jake. Both screamed, each strike fighting. their approach. Challenging. Whatever. This is more like telling. This is telling, but these are two different styles of describing a fight. You know, like there are different ways to do it. I like to do a mixture. I do a very detailed description of fights, but I slow it down for the emotions because I want to get inside the character's head. My friend says he likes stuff like this, where it's just like it's suggested, and then like you as the reader get to, be like, oh, it could be this. They're fighting and blocking, and there's all the. I like this a little bit more, but then like I like to slow it down a little bit more. It depends. It really depends. Hey, talking of movies, have you watched Havoc? Maybe Havoc, did I? 2025? I did not. I have not seen that movie. Anyway. All right. Looks interesting. A couple good actors in that movie. I might have to check it out. All right. Any other questions before we go? I had a lot of fun with this. We were almost at 2 hours. I guess let's do all the other stuff. Let's do all the other stuff. Do all the other stuff. Where's I had a thing. Oh yeah. Boop. I think that'll fit. Let's see if this fits. Do. I think that'll fit. Let's try it. Boop. Remember, I have a book out. I'm thank you to everyone who's already purchased the book. Everybody who has been supporting the book. They're over there. I got a big box of them, so that's exciting. But you can get it on my website, which is makearightlefthehere.com. There's a hardcover. There's an ebook. I am currently in the Kindle Unlimited, so you could just read the book if you want, if you have the Unlimited package. And also it comes in paperback, so that should be fun. And the audio book, I'm editing the audio. I'm almost done with that, so that'll be ready. When you're editing, do you still stick your hour or two? Yes. Yeah. So my writing time is a 120-minute time block, or more importantly, 2-hour-long time blocks, and sometimes I break that up. That is my writing time. So I'm either going to be writing, thinking, brainstorming, outlining, editing, whatever it is. That is my writing time. I usually don't separate those two. So when I create, like, even a networking time block, like I have a networking time block, I have like a financial time block. I don't necessarily say this one is going to be for this only. I got a network, and then I look at my to-do list, and I look at all the things that have to do with building and cultivating relationships to establish a strong circle of influence. And anything that has to do with that, I try to put into that box. So I do that with writing too. ADHD on steroids. Havoc. Get Thomas's book. Yeah, bro, Monday I'll be sending it out with a nice little message. I really appreciate it, the love and support. Trust me, I'm grateful for it. What else? If you haven't done so already, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. I've been having a lot of fun with these live videos, and honestly, you can't ask for a better group, better group. So, but for the fact, Bloop the Beard, this is available for shirt and cups. I'm going to make some more options for people, but I just made this yesterday as a joke. I am working on the sort of Bloop Bloop thing. I will be having fun with that. But I had a lot of fun making that. Also, just for fun, this is a cover I'm working on for the first book in the epic fantasy series, the Maven Wars saga, Death of a King. This is book 1. I spent a lot of time on this one. Getting the blood right and getting the crown to look like I wanted to. That was a lot of work. But I really love how the background came out. And I've been working on different designs for my name, but I think this is working. And the color scheme, it's always good to do that. And then book 2, I have the book 2 cover, Legacy and Blood. See, I'm always keeping myself, and obviously you need Man of War. But anyway, Man of War. You need Man of War. Anyway, for everyone out there, remember, you can reach out to me on makearightlefthehere.com if you have questions outside of these live. Remember, they're available when and wherever you can. Lol. You could always hit me up. I'm always happy to respond. If I don't respond immediately, you'll definitely get it within 24 hours. I'm very good with that. And you won't just get a like, hey, thanks. You'll get a real response. I appreciate you reaching out to me. So anything else? I guess that's it. I guess that's it. That's everything. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will be going over, I think we're on Chapter 8, right? Chapter 8 or Chapter 9 or something like that. Whatever the case is. Man of War. We'll be working. We'll be Write a Book With Me series. We're on number 28 or something like that. I can't. Flying through. Where are we? Is it 28? I think it's 20. Yeah, 28. Good times. All right, I guess other than that, we're done, right? Yep, that's it. Answering. We already answered. Okay, we did everything. Need to clear your search history. Heavy metal, no metal at all. Wimps and posers must leave the hall. Heavy metal, no metal, right? We're Man of War. I need to clear my eyes. Clear them up. Yeah, well, Man of War makes it difficult for anyone to see after. Man of War. All right, it's time for me to get some lunch. Oh, I had a good time. To everyone out there, much love, as always. I'm Thomas J. Bellezza. I will see you tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as always, keep developing the right mindset. Bye.